and businesses. Call them today at 708-889-5600.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. Philip Klein writing over at National Review, representing one side of the schism in Trump support over the Iran deal, pending Iran deal. To claim that this isn't an embarrassment for the U.S. requires ignoring months of Trump's statements before and during the war about his red lines and war aims. People are getting too focused on the text of the Memorandum of Understanding itself, and the text needs to be viewed with the added context of Trump's public statements, in which he gave away the store on just about every major point of contention he claimed he had with Iran until very recently. Trump, either in his words or in the MOU, abandoned his positions in favor of the Iranian position on supporting anti-regime protesters, allowing the enrichment of uranium, removing Iran's enriched uranium, and on its ballistic missile program. Just to review, just the facts here, and now you can all chalk this all up to pragmatism in pursuit of peace, but you can't just not address the argument because there's substance here. In January, Trump urged Iranian protesters to keep protesting and take over your institutions because help was on the way. You remember that. Vowing, quote, very strong action, unquote, if Iran executed protesters, which it did, somewhere in the neighborhood estimates of 30 to 50,000 people executed by these moderates that are in charge in Tehran right now. We're told, moderates. February 28th, to the great, proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. Stay sheltered. Don't leave your home. It's very dangerous outside. Bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. For nearly a decade, this is more Philip Klein here, going back to his first term, Trump criticized Obama's Iran deal on the basis it allowed Iran to maintain its missile program and cited the missile threat as one of the primary reasons why he launched the war. And yet, at the G7, Trump said it would be unfair to tell Iran that it couldn't have ballistic missiles. We talked about that a bit yesterday. It's a jarring statement he made.
Country. So we'll be working on a parallel effort with the Gulf nations to address non-nuclear issues such as the conventional ballistic missiles, which we'll be talking about, and support. They have to have some because other people have some. You got to have some. Somebody said you shouldn't give them one. I have guys. I like some of these guys, but I don't think they're smart. Sir, you shouldn't let them have any missile. I said, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to let Saudi Arabia have missiles, but they can't have them? Yes, sir. It doesn't work that way, It doesn't work that way. And missiles aren't the problem. Missiles they hurt a little location, but they don't blow up the planet.
Well, they're part of the problem. Yes, nuclear weapons been preventing Iran from having nuclear weapons is more important than the ballistic missile program, but Iranian ballistic missiles are a problem. Any weapons in the hands of these Islamist lunatics, which he used to call them lunatics, is a problem. As we talked about a bit yesterday, their intermediate ballistic missiles can reach Western European capitals, as we found out during this campaign. It was a problem when you were talking about the Obama deal in an op-ed in USA Today 10 years ago, as I read from yesterday. Trump's op-ed, 2015. Similar statements to what Marco Rubio offered on the Senate floor in 2015 about the JCPOA. Again, going back to Philip Klein, people can have different perspectives on whether Iran should be able or not to enrich uranium, have ballistic missiles, or massacre domestic protesters, but the record is clear that Trump moved dramatically in the direction of the Iranians over the course of negotiations rather than the other way around. And he unlocked tens of billions of dollars in sanctions relief as well. As a result of his capitulation to Iranian demands, Trump has degraded his ability to have his threats taken seriously. Throughout the war, he spoke in apocalyptic terms about what he was going to do if the Iranians didn't bend to his will, and those threats went unfulfilled, even though they didn't bend to his will. And now, as you heard at Mike Scott's newscast, he's telling Mark Caputo that he demanded unconditional surrender at the outset, and he's calling this unconditional surrender. This is many things, but it's not unconditional surrender. It's like, his updated definition of a ceasefire, which in the Iranian context is moderate shooting. That's what, I mean, it's sort of a punchline, but when you're redefining unconditional surrender as well, it starts to get less funny. For more on the topic, pleased to be joined by Andrew Latham, Senior Washington Fellow at the Institute for Peace and Diplomacy and a professor of international relations and political theory at Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota. Professor Latham, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Great pleasure to be here.
So what do you think of what's your perspective on sort of the criticism nicely exemplified by Philip Klein coming from conservative erstwhile Trump supporters as it pertains to this deal and where Trump has been through the course of the campaign versus what is memorialized in this MOU?
Yeah, well, I'll approach it in as nonpartisan way as I possibly can. Going into this war, the United States had three objectives: ending the Iranian nuclear program, severely curtailing its ballistic missile capabilities, and getting Tehran to stop supporting its proxies in the region, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. And then once the shooting started, a fourth objective got added, which was opening the Strait of Hormuz to Gulf states' oil and other kinds of maritime traffic. This agreement, this MOU in the interim, addresses only the new problem. It doesn't get at any of the pre-existing problems, which have been problems now for decades, which the JCPOA during the Obama years failed to address properly, adequately. So we've got this interim deal deals with only the new problem that was added 2 months ago. It doesn't address any of the underlying issues. In fact, in affording Tehran sanctions relief and access to some of the frozen financial assets in the United States, it reduces American leverage going into these 60 days of negotiations that are meant to get at those deep underlying issues. So if I were to try and judge this process, this MOU plus the 60 days, which, by the way, are now being delayed for reasons we can talk about, I would have to say that it provides a solution to a problem that was only created 2 months ago and fails abjectly when it comes to the three underlying strategic issues. So if I were grading this particular process, it would be a C- or a D+.
Well, right, because the fourth matter that was added, opening the Strait of Hormuz, was a contingency that was the direct result of the initiation of the campaign. So it was open before the campaign's initiated. Then they used that choke point, the Iranians did, as their leverage. And, and part of the thing I think that bedevils people about the last, not just this MOU, but the last 6 weeks leading up to the MOU is there was not just talk, but there was some initiation of an approach to reopen the strait by force, Project Freedom, but it was never fully consummated. And one is, I'm left unsatisfied by whatever explanations have been offered as to why Project Freedom wasn't efforted in a significant way to take that leverage away from the Iranians permanently and to send a signal to the Chinese communists as well, that sort of leverage, or that the apparent the belief that is a sort of leverage that would stultify U.S. efforts when it comes to commercial traffic or when it comes to trying to sideline the lead state sponsor of terror. That's not going to work. And so if you think that's your ace in the hole, it's not your ace in the hole. I thought that's where the president was going to go. He had threatened to go in that direction a couple times. There were some feints made in the direction of reopening the strait by force and providing naval escorts. And it just never was fully consummated, and I don't know why.
Yeah, and I wasn't in the room and privy to the conversation, but from the outside looking in, it seems to me that this administration tried to forcibly reopen the Strait of Hormuz and realized pretty quickly that that was impossible. Now, the United States forces really did destroy the Iranian Navy and the Iranian, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps naval force as well. But those are the major surface and subsurface combatants. They weren't the small boats that could evade American firepower. And they didn't address the mine problem either. The United States had actually, perhaps ironically, mothballed most of its minesweepers not too long ago, and so didn't have much in the way of minesweeping capability. And what that meant was the Iranians, no matter what the U.S. military did, the Iranians would retain the ability to problematize, if I can put it that way, any passage through the Strait of Hormuz. And that then affects insurance rates. It affects the threat assessment on the part of the people who own these tankers and these freighters. And so you don't have to completely close down the strait in order to make the strait impassable, if I can put it that way. And I think this administration learned that lesson pretty quickly and moved to Plan B or Plan C or Plan D, whatever it was, right after that. So that, I think, is what accounts for the failure to prosecute that effort.
Now, the flip side, too, because I don't want to understate the devastation wrought on the Iranian military that you were referencing, taking out their Navy and their Air Force and destroying significant parts of its domestic industrial production infrastructure. And there's also this too. There's and I don't know that this is true, but this is something that's been asserted that Iranians' ballistic missile manufacturing sites took 11 years to excavate. Storage areas, it took them 7 years. You can't just store ballistic missiles in a warehouse. So like that infrastructure that was destroyed, in terms of the projections of, even if you're uncomfortable with the deal, and even if the Iranians live down to expectations of how they'll actually behave when money starts flowing back into their coffers, you're still talking about having sidelined the Iranians in terms of the capacity they had pre-war for a significant period of time, 7, 10, 15 years, a generation at least.
Well, maybe. The Iranians have literally, once again, had decades to build a military infrastructure that was meant to blunt the ability of the United States to take it out. So 11 years, yes. And did the United States destroy a chunk of that infrastructure, that ballistic missile and nuclear infrastructure? Yes, both during this operation and last summer as well, in conjunction with the Israelis. But there's plenty left. And the problem is that the United States is running out of bunker busters and other kinds of precision-guided munitions that have that penetrative ability faster than it is destroying the Iranian infrastructure. So for Iran to win, quote unquote, they simply have to hunker down and sustain what the United States and Israel, in a different context, can deliver, and emerge at the end of the day with enough residual capability to inflict damage on its neighbors, America's friends and allies in the Gulf, and also to close down the Strait of Hormuz. That's all they really have to do to, again, quote unquote, win this conflict. And they have been preparing for this for decades, and they seem to have prevailed in that particular way.
President Trump thanked Putin and Xi for remaining essentially neutral and not providing, particularly Xi, not providing the weaponry he could have provided the Iranians. That's essentially what Trump said. When when she, I mean, since part of the argument was what is being done here with the Iranians in preventing them from obtaining nuclear weapons is in part a part of a larger strategy to deal with the actual the main geopolitical threat the United States faces, and that's the Chinese Communist Party. So if that's true, then what do you think she takes away from what he sees as the state of play with the Iranians and the U.S. right now?
Yeah, it's a very good question. A couple of different responses, one of which is the People's Liberation Army, China's army, has been watching what the United States is capable of. Right, it has seen the United States operating in real time, sees what its limitations are, what its abilities are, and you can be sure that they will be adjusting their own forces accordingly. So that's a win right off the bat for the Chinese Communist Party under Xi. But they're also looking at American credibility, America's ability to deliver on its promises to its partners and friends and allies around the world. And they see that being undermined. The Gulf states and the United States have similar objectives in the region to some degree, but they have divergent interests. And America, as a reliable strategic partner, has been called into question by this entire process. And that works to China's benefit as well. And then China has cleverly, craftily positioned itself in the region as the champion of the global South, the champion of the non-West, and has kind of tried to maintain some kind of equidistance and not quite neutrality, but also to play the role of champion of states like Iran that are on the receiving end, and to represent itself as a reliable partner. And it should be said as a kind of footnote, too, that although China didn't supply a lot of weapons to Iran, it has never stopped providing Iran with lots of dual-use technologies, lots of diplomatic cover, lots of support short of actually deploying military forces or providing direct, weapons directly to Tehran. So they are benefiting. Beijing is benefiting from this to the extent that Washington is losing, and that's something that should be of great concern.
Do you think they look at it, particularly with an eye towards commercial shipping routes that the Chi-Coms seek to dominate, the South China Sea, and so forth? Do you think that they look at the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz that was imposed by the U.S. Navy and say, well, that's pretty impressive, and we have to consider that? And on the flip side, look at the sort of the domestic politics in the United States and say, but I'll tell you what, that's a country that doesn't have the appetite to go as deep as they're going to need to go to stop us.
Yeah, well, with respect to the first question, there are a number of other choke points as well that the Chinese Communist Party is very concerned about, the Straits of Malacca by Malaysia, right, and so on. So again, they're looking at this. I think what we're going to see both in the region and beyond the region is an effort to diversify transportation routes, to build more pipelines, and to rely less on the strait. I think that's going to be a knock-on effect of this conflict. We've already seen it underway, by the way. There are various pipelines that cut across Saudi Arabia to the Red Sea. The irony there, of course, is that the Houthis at the Gate of Tears at the southern end of the Red Sea are threatening to close off that choke point as well. So it's a difficult problem, a bit of a wicked problem, as it were. But I think we're going to see a lot of players looking to diversify those transportation routes, those pipelines, instead of ships. But China's also mindful of that bigger issue of choke points that affect it, which is why, by the way, it is one of the reasons it's closing up to Russia is the Northern Sea route, rather than going through the Strait of Malacca and then through the Gate of Tears or the Strait of Hormuz, go across the top as the Arctic ice pack begins to contract, go across the top of Russia. No choke points there as long as you play nice with Putin, and the Chinese are inclined to do that anyway. So that's how I would address the choke point issue. As I recall, the domestic politics in this country, I think Americans, many Americans, especially Trump supporters now, are fed up with, again, the knock-on effects in terms of higher prices at the gas pumps and the kind of economic downturn that this has generated in certain parts of the country. And I think Trump ever having his finger in the air when it comes to domestic politics was sensitive to that, and I think that's part of why he's wanting to wind this down as quickly and as geopolitically unfavorably as he is.
The one of the arguments being made by both Trump and Vance is that all the Gulf states that are part of the coalition, all on board with this deal, all the presidents and PMs that Trump talked to at the G7, all on board with this deal, so they say. Are they on board with the deal because they think that it delivers on the promises to sideline Iran the way that Vance is arguing and trying to sell this deal? Or are they voicing their support for the deal because they see that America doesn't have the appetite to do some of the things that that President Trump indicated they might do? And, we, the Gulf states or the Western European nations, we're certainly not going to do it. We're not going to backfill it. So if this is the way out for the Americans, then we're on board because what choice do we have?
Yeah, I think that's right. Above all, they just want the shooting to stop and the oil to begin flowing again.
But they're not buying. But they're not buying the rap that Vance is selling.
Oh no! I don't think so. The other point worth making there, though, is that the Cold War between the Gulf Cooperation Council states, Qatar and Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, and Iran on the other side, which has ethnic roots, Persians versus Arabs, which has religious roots, Shia versus Sunni, etc., and there's a long history of Persian imperialism in the Arab world. All of that, China stepped in last year, and negotiated a kind of détente, if I can continue to use the Cold War analogy. Saudi Arabia and Iran reopened their embassies, which had been closed down in each other's countries and so on. So there was a kind of rapprochement that dialed down the tension in the region, which served the interest, the economic interest especially, of the Saudis and the Bahrainis and the Qataris, etc. And this conflict, of course, has taken that in a totally different direction, but it leaves China once again looking like the good guy, the helpful fixer, and leaves the Americans looking undependable, erratic, driven by domestic politics, not by the concerns of allies and partners in the region. All of this is just eroding America's hard power. Our magazines, our arsenals are depleted to the point where we couldn't actually defend Taiwan if the Chinese made a move there at the moment. But also America's soft power in terms of its leadership in the region and the broader world. All of that's been undermined by this episode in ways that it will take us years to really fully appreciate. But we can already see where this is going. And from Washington's perspective, or from St. Paul's perspective or Chicago's perspective, it ain't good.
Yeah, but now the flip side is to say, just to borrow from Neil Ferguson the other day, saying, this could end up working out a lot better in terms of the implementation phase than it appears to look on paper at present. And he sort of did a comparison, the Woodrow Wilson 14-point plan after World War I, that looked great on paper, didn't turn out to be particularly effective. So, Ferguson wants to give some latitude here because the decisions you make after the agreements are signed and contingencies arise are going to really tell the tale here in terms of what kind of impact this campaign ultimately had on the Iranians in the region.
Yeah, well, there are two dimensions to that argument. One of which is has to do with the negotiations themselves over 60 days. What leverage does the U.S. have left? It has very little leverage. In terms of its military abilities, the Iranians have convinced themselves they can withstand that. They're getting sanctions relief. They're getting a $300 billion reconstruction fund. And the big issues are still on the table. And the United States has no real leverage. Ironically, the best Washington, the Trump administration can hope for now is the JCPOA 2.0. The Obama agreement, which only kind of and very imperfectly limited the nuclear program, didn't touch on the ballistic missiles, didn't touch on the proxy issue. That's all that the United States is likely to get out of this. And then, you're right, Woodrow Wilson, the 14 points looked wonderful and led almost directly to World War II. And so the way in which the implementation of whatever is agreed works itself out is going to matter. The details matter. The footnotes matter. But again, I'm not sure that – I am sure that in Tehran, they're just simply saying to themselves, look, we hunker down. We don't make too many concessions. We throw a little bit to Trump here and there, and we will prevail. And they're better positioned to ride out the 60 days and get pretty much what they want. They're better positioned than Washington is to ride out the 60 days because they're not going to get what the Trump administration wants.
Andrew Latham, Senior Washington Fellow at the Institute for Peace and Diplomacy, Professor of International Relations and Political Theory at McAllister College in St. Paul, Minnesota. Professor Latham, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
A great pleasure.
And he joined us on the alphawealthgroup.com answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer. On AM 560. The Answer. It's news, opinion, and insight at the speed of your life. Streaming at 560theanswer.com on the AM 560 mobile app, or tell your smart speaker to play The Answer Chicago.
Sunshine and 61 in the QC.